If you're running a 7 or 8 figure D2C brand, you probably felt a shift in your meta ad performance over the last few months. Your CPMs feel less predictable, your winning creatives are burning out faster than ever, and your cost to acquire a customer feels like it's slowly creeping upward. And it's not because your ad suddenly stopped working, it's because the fundamental operating system of Meta's ad platform has completely changed. It's called Andromeda. And while it's creating chaos for most advertisers, it's creating a massive opportunity for sophisticated brands that know how to leverage it. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you the exact framework that we are using internally with our 7-8 figure e-commerce clients to build a creative diversification system that thrives in the Andromeda era. So you can scale with more stability, more profitability, and a real competitive edge. All right, so what is Andromeda? So in July of 2025, Meta fully rolled out a new algorithm that fundamentally changed how ads are served. The system can now process 10,000 times more ad creatives at any given moment. It's really because of the influx of AI creative. And so what this means is that your 3 or 4 creatives per week are no longer competing in a small pond. Your creative is competing in an ocean of tons of different creative. And so the algorithm's ability to find the perfect person for an ad has become exponentially better. Many people think Andromeda is like a bad thing, but if you know how to create diverse creatives, it will actually work in your favor, but only if you give it enough distinct options for it to choose from. So here's the core principle that you need to understand as a marketer. Creative truly controls targeting. And I've been saying this for the last year plus, but with the influx of Andromeda, we've definitely been seeing it. Your broad audiences are typically fine. Your targeting isn't necessarily the problem. The real issue is that you're using the same core message, the same hook, and the same angle across all of your ads. You're only giving the algorithm one key to unlock one type of customer. To win now, you need to fuel Andromeda's algorithm with enough creative to hit different pocket audiences. So let me break it down like this. Before, we had basically, you had this big customer segment that probably you were speaking to, right? And so usually, historically, what we want to do is we want to try to target those customers that are most likely to buy. So you would have this very specific message, but now what we're finding is that there's micro niches in the niches, right? So let's just say for a supplement, right? Let's just say it was a protein product and the majority of the market, most of the messaging was just around like protein, muscle growth, right? It was just about muscle growth, maybe a gym bro culture. Well, there's actually tons more potential customers that you could speak to, different angles, different ways to communicate. That could be like women, it could be impacts to bone health. I don't know what it could be, but all these different angles for that product, right? And so what Andromeda wants us to do is to create many different content pillars that speak to every single segment of our market. This is why the old playbook is failing and maybe why you're experiencing ad fatigue. Before Andromeda, you could get away with maybe 3 or 4 solid creatives per week, and you could even just film one great video body, swap out the first 3 seconds, would test different hooks, relaunch the campaign, and performance would come back. And what we're seeing is that approach is now dead. Actually, it's worse than dead. It's actively punished by the new system because Andromeda is basically taking creatives that you upload, and if it just has a slight tweak to the hook, it's going to treat that ad as the same type of ad, right? So if you have 3 ads and all that has changed is the hook, and Meta's basically going to feed through the Andromeda algorithm and say this is the same creative. That's why ads fatigue, because you're simply giving Meta basically small little micro variations of the same creative over and over again. And literally that's ad fatigue on steroids. The algorithm has become immune to slight variations. It sees them for what they really are, the same ad just wearing a different coat of paint. The brands struggling right now are the ones still operating this way. They're looking for micro adjustments, little tiny improvements to their ad creative. And the brands winning, the ones scaling profitably, have made a fundamental mindset shift. They've stopped thinking in terms of individual ads, and they've started thinking in terms of messaging diversification. This is very important. So let's just say you have an offer, right? Let's say you have an offer here. Now, what most people start to do is they start to think of like customer demographics, they think of unique selling points. What we really need to prioritize is messaging, right? What are the many ways that we can message and communicate that to a customer? And one thing that Meta actually talks about is that they're looking for diversification of like creative type and stuff like that. But really what we've seen is that messaging is one of the most important elements of the Andromeda update. And so with that, we need to create unique messages. And literally in this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly, okay, what does that actually look like in practice? So how do you adapt and create new messaging? Well, there's really 2 paths that you could go down. Path 1 is brute force. You can produce 50 or more creatives per week. For most brands, even at the 8-figure level, this is an operational nightmare that drains resources and cash flow to create that much creative at scale. But path 2 is the approach that we're starting to implement with a lot of our clients, which is more strategic. And what we call it is a diverse messaging approach, okay? Very important. We're talking about messaging here. The goal isn't volume. I think a mistake that many brands make is they say, oh, we need creative diversification. So they just churn out tons and tons of different creatives. They think they need to have like a bunch of different cuts, bunch of different UGC creators, like all this different variety. I think the most important thing that you should focus on is the message, right? Because Meta is reading your graphics. It is hearing your videos. It's figuring out what is that message and what is the customer that is most likely to convert based upon that message. And so people are currently tackling the Andromeda update by just saying, okay, we just need creative diversity. Let's create as many different looking creatives. And that's a lot of work. You should first start with the most highest leverage, the biggest pillar, which is the message. So the goal isn't just volume, it's strategic variety. You want to create 15 to 20 completely unique ads every single month. Each ad is built around one single reason someone would buy your product. To do this, we use a process called the customer motivation matrix. And it's pretty simple. You and your team can brainstorm every possible reason, angle, psychological trigger that would lead someone to buy your product. Do not filter yourself. Write every single thing down. So for example, let's focus on the protein offer. Okay, we're selling protein. It's not just about building muscle, right? We need to think more than just building muscle here. There's probably way more ways that we can communicate a unique message to the market. So it could be no artificial sweeteners, right? It could be that no artificial sweeteners. So what it does is it doesn't wreck gut health, right? So maybe there's a gut health angle that you can talk about, right? Maybe there's collagen in your protein that supports, skin, joints, not just muscle, right? Maybe there's other unique factors of your protein. Another one could be third-party tested, right? These are three very unique messages, right? And okay, why are we focused on these micro messages? You might be like, Patrick, I've run a supplement brand for so long. People buy protein because muscle building, right? Wrong, okay? What Andromeda has allowed us to do is to really target those specific customer segments based upon the message. So although, right, going back to this pie chart, let's just say a part of the market, yes, you're right. A lot of the market is really just focused on maybe building muscle and the taste, right? There's those macro messages that you probably want to communicate. But like I said, there's a whole other piece of the market that is cares about these different things, right? So someone cares about artificial sweeteners, right? Someone cares about this. Someone cares about collagen and maybe they want something that supports their joints. There's another angle that they care about. Third-party tester, there's people that want to hear about the trust, right? These different ads help us reach other customer demographics. And so what happens with ad fatigue is if you keep talking the same message over and over, you're just hitting the same audience like crazy, right? And this is very competitive. This is the red ocean, right? This is where all your competitors are speaking to. But if you can figure out the unique messages that can target these people, the algorithm will pick that up and serve that customer that ad, right? Another one could be, right, taste, right? So it doesn't feel like chalky protein, right? So it's not chalky protein, right? So what are all the unique selling props, unique messages that you can communicate to the customer? A few more, let's just keep rattling them off. It helps them recover faster, right? Maybe people are really focused on that, recover faster, so less sore after your workouts. So each one of these is a distinct motivation. It's a distinct motivation to buy that different parts of the market are interested in. And each of these messages becomes the foundation for a completely unique ad. This brings us to the most critical part of the framework, the alignment between the hook, the body, and the call to action. So now that we have all of these messages, these are all the different messages we want to communicate to the market. Every ad must resolve around one single core motivation. So instead of creating just a bunch of different variations that are focusing on like this red ocean part of the market, now we can create unique ads for each one of these messages. You can't just swap the hook anymore and hope that will reignite the ads. The entire ad from start to finish has to be cohesive. Let's say if the motivation is gut health, the hook speaks to bloating, the body explains clean ingredients, and the call to action reinforces easy digestion. And you film that as one complete ad. The same goes with graphics and stills, right? You can have some variety, different colors and stuff like that. But again, focus on messaging. It's the most highest leverage thing that you can test in your ad creative. And then, so maybe you create a video like that, you create a still like that, and then you repeat the process for every single motivation. That's how you create true messaging diversification. Now you might be thinking, how do we come up with that many angles? This is where you systematize creativity. We use a methodology called the 100 hook framework. 100 hook framework. Okay, 100 hook framework, and it organizes hooks into 6 psychological categories. Very important. Let's break it down here. So urgency. So we have urgency and scarcity. Okay, that's one. We have social proof and authority. Okay, we have problem, agitation. Okay, we have curiosity gap. We have transformation and outcomes. And then we have tactical and specific. Okay, let me just make sure I got all 6 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So these are the 6 psychological factors. Now, when we look at these 6, the 2 that I recommend for 7 to 8 figure brands to really double down on is social proof and authority and problem agitation. These are what we're seeing are really, stopping people in their scrolling feed when they're doom scrolling and actually making them take action. Authority hooks position you as an insider with exclusive insight. For example, you could have a personal trainer that says, after training 100 plus professional athletes, here's what I've learned about protein synthesis. That builds immediate credibility. Problem agitation hooks speak directly to frustration your audience feels right now. For example, it could be something like you're working so hard in the gym, but you're not seeing the results in the mirror. Something like that really pinpoints a problem that a customer is facing. This creates urgency and relevance. And so when you systematically apply these categories to each customer motivation, you generate a near endless pipeline of differentiated creative angles. And that's exactly what Andromeda needs. So what I'd recommend you do is you understand, right, do a brainstorm, upload this into ChatGPT, Claude, Manus, any AI that you're using, and the AI can do a lot, right, for you, right? You don't need to be physically writing out all these ads. So why does this matter at your scale? This isn't just about ad performance. It's about building a more resilient business. First, it de-risks your ad spend. You're no longer dependent on a single angle or creative. When one fatigues, you have multiple others ready to scale. And that creates more consistent revenue and smoother cash flow, right? One thing that I always see with e-commerce brands is what happens is they test, right? They're testing, they test, they find a winning ad, they scale, and then add that ad starts to fatigue. What we need to be able to do is we need to be able to keep catching it. So you kind of have these little peaks, right? But overall, the trend is upwards. If you're kind of extremely volatile, you find a winner, oh my God, and then it died. And then you're working so hard, you can't find winning ads. You're just so volatile. You're just up to the discretion of the algorithm. That's where brands get super stagnant, super volatile. So the goal here, like I said, is to catch those waves and continue to grow in upward momentum. This is literally the graph. What happens when a creative fatigues? It hits, one starts to work, oh my God, it's working, and then it dies out, right? So we need to keep having enough creatives to weather that storm and keep moving in that upward trajectory. So second, it increases profitability. This system uncovers pockets of demand you never would have reached before. Because before Andromeda, you were just creating ads and they were serving it to the best quality audience. Now Andromeda has the ability to literally show your content to very specific pocket audiences, which will in turn reduce your CPAs and your blended CAC and increase your contribution margin. And third, this could potentially increase the valuation of your company. If you're operating at 7, 8 figures, and you should already be thinking about potentially exiting your e-commerce brand. And acquirers want to see business with defensible growth systems. Can you actually scale your ads, or are you up to the discretion of the algorithm where your growth is just super volatile? We don't want to have one-hit wonders in ad accounts. We need a documented creative diversification engine that is a real asset. The Andromeda update has permanently changed paid advertising on Meta. You can no longer win with just a simple handful of creatives testing different hooks and just praying that it actually works. Volume matters, but even more important, strategic diversity is what separates the brands that struggle on advertising and the brands that scale. All right, so here's the playbook for creating ads in the post-Andromeda era. Okay, 1, we need to identify diverse motivations. Okay. Number 2, build unique ads around each motivation with aligned hooks, bodies, and CTA. Unique is key here. Then you want to systematize production, right? So you need a way to constantly churn out new scripts, turn out new briefs, and get those executed. This is how you build a creative moat and competitive moat when it comes to scaling up your ad account. It is more upfront work, but if you're able to build this out in-house or work with a team like us to get this system in place, it really creates stability, profitability, long-term enterprise value. And if you're a 7 or 8-figure e-commerce brand and you're ready to move beyond daily ad volatility and install a true creative diversification system, then book a call down below. What we'll do is we'll audit your ad account. We'll understand what your creative strategy looks like right now, and we'll walk through this framework for your specific brand and build a roadmap to scalable growth. So click the link down below to book in that free audit call. I look forward to seeing you inside.